The Giants' offensive line will have its first significant change this weekend due to the Andrew Thomas injury. How might the unit be schemed differently? And how winnable is this game against the Eagles for the Giants? All that and more with today's special guest, Bobby Skinner of Talking Giants, on today's Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find my written work. And as always, welcome on into my Blue Crew community members, my newcomers, my everydayers, and everybody in between. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And what better way to close out the week? Kind of a weird week in that it was disappointing, some bad news, but big game against the Philadelphia Eagles coming up. So what better way to close out the week than to have Bobby Skinner on the program? Bobby Skinner from Talking Giants, the other half of the dynamic duo. We had Justin Pennick on last week. It is Bobby's turn, and Bobby, it is so good to see you.
Big week. I'm so nervous. No, it's a good time to come on. This Eagles game has been probably the game that everybody's circled on the calendar, and I'm looking forward to it.
All right, Bobby. On today's show, what I want to go through, just the first segment, we'll talk a little bit about the O-line news. Some bad news, obviously, with Andrew Thomas being out for the season. How the Giants are going to make up for that. I mean, if they can, and then we'll talk a little bit about Saquon Barkley and if the Giants miss him, and then we'll wrap things up with some thoughts about the upcoming Eagles game. So, Bobby, I want to start with the offensive line. Obviously, the one player they could ill afford to lose on that offensive line, Andrew Thomas, unfortunately, season-ending foot injury. How does this potentially change the complexion of that offensive line in terms of what they have been doing and what they need to do in order to kind of still play at a decent enough level?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see because there is going to be fall off. I think he was the most important player on the team. You saw last year the offense was essentially inoperable unless they were playing the Arizona Cardinals, who were the worst pass rush group in the NFL, paired with a bad secondary. They were scoring less than 10 points per game in those games without him. So he's obviously a huge component of what they do. And with the improved offensive line, a big part of that has been letting the other guys work together as a unit, and they leave Andrew Thomas on an island. All game long, it didn't matter if it was Myles Garrett, Trey Hendrickson, they left him one-on-one, down in, down out, essentially. So it's a huge loss, and we've seen Daniel Jones splits in his career. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but his touchdown rate goes in half, and his interception rate doubles. His sack rate goes up by 5%. Without Andrew Thomas. So it's a huge loss. The Giants are, since Andrew Thomas has been in the league, the best prepared to deal with it. But they still, if you're going to put Josh Azuda at left tackle, you're going to have to give him a lot of help because he is very capable of disaster plays. And that's what you can't have at your blind side in the NFL is someone that gives you disaster moments.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that, the potential that they put help on that side. I mean, it's not something they can do for every play, I think, because then it becomes, it tilts the offense to the left side, whereas Daniel Jones is a right-handed quarterback. But, realistically speaking, I mean, do you see other ways they could potentially help Josh Azudu besides putting the tackle there, or is it pretty much, a gamble at this point?
It is a gamble. Now, the Giants run a lot of quick game with Daniel Jones as their quarterback. So, even if he gets beat, there's going to be times where the ball's out regardless. But I really do think anytime there is a play that they are hoping to develop out a little longer, and that doesn't just mean deep passes. Sometimes that means a 12-yard pass over the middle to Malik Neighbors. There's going to be help. There's going to have to be help, or DJ's going to have, there's have to be a mental clock of all right, if it's not there when I'm expecting it to be there, I need to move. I need to check my blind side and get off the spot that I'm in. And that's why it's so important is like the blind side is a very real thing. When Evan Neal was really bad in 2022, guess what? The Giants offense played well that year because they were able to see, like go watch the Vikings playoff game. Evan Neal played very poorly in that game, but when he would have his bad snaps, which were consistently, DJ would either get the ball out quick or, scramble up in the pocket and throw or run. On the blind side, it's just you're hoping that disaster play doesn't come for you. And that's the worry. Where long term, I think I would put Jermaine Illuminor at left tackle because I at least know I can trust him on a down out basis. Not to be perfect, but good enough. I think they can get through this game, but the whole season it's going to be tough to just trust that Azudu isn't going to hurt you. I mean, he literally hurt Daniel Jones last year in the Miami game.
I want to get to your point about Jermaine Illuminor in a second, but first I want to ask you about, you mentioned getting the ball out of the hand quick. Can the Giants offense sustain an attack with just strictly throwing those short, quick passes, or do they become easy to defend to the point where now the linebackers can sit on those shorter routes and, be in a position to knock them away?
That's been a Giants issue with or without, Andrew Thomas with Daniel Jones as their quarterback. You saw the Bengals do that. But when you don't have Andrew Thomas, the defense can bet on it, right? They can bet like, all right, we can trust our rush to get there. Now there's ways to get out of that. It's the 2 tight end play action type of stuff that the Giants have done a good amount of under Brian Dable in the past, not as much this year. So there's ways to work around it. But I think this is the downfall of the Giants offense without Andrew Thomas and without Daniel Jones as your quarterback is you're going to have games like the Seahawks. I actually think the Eagles are a good matchup where the quick game is going to work. They're going to give you that, but you're going to have games like the Bengals where they're going to get aggressive. They're going to come after you and they're going to make you beat them deep. And if they don't, that's going to be an issue.
Now you mentioned before, maybe long-term putting Jermaine Illuminor on the left side, but that necessitates obviously changing up 2 positions, which I'm sure, the Giants would rather not do. So if they were to make that move, Evan Neal would probably be the next man up at right tackle. Given that Evan Neal didn't really practice all spring, most of the summer, basically he didn't start practicing until about 6 weeks ago. That's what he told us in the locker room. How comfortable would you really feel at this point, especially knowing Evan Neal's history here on the field?
I don't have any comfort in Evan Neal playing well. I just have more comfort in the bad player being on Daniel Jones's front side compared to his back side. Like that's really his base. And I am very much against moving your offensive lineman around. Like find a backup tackle, find a backup guard, find a backup center. If any of those positions gets in, that's the player that you put in. But I think there's an exception when it comes to when you have to put a guy like Josh Azudu or Evan Neal at your left tackle spot. I think that's where you make an exception. And Jermaine Illuminor is someone who has experience doing it. He did it just last season when the Raiders lost Colton Miller for a couple games. He went and played left tackle. So you have a veteran player who's used to doing it. I would make the exception for this because I think they're going to have a bad spot one way or the other. I'd rather have it on the front side for all the reasons I mentioned before, where we've seen DJ play with bad right tackle play and be able to, play above average. We have never really seen him overcome bad left tackle play in his career.
Good point. Good point. Now, Evan Neal did play left tackle in college. I believe the final year of his 3-year career down in Alabama. For whatever the reason, the Giants saw him as a right tackle, though. If they had to go that route, how confident would you be in that scenario?
Not at all. Like you mentioned, it was his final year. Evan Neal was projected to be the first overall pick before he ever took a snap at left tackle in college. I think his issues are much different, much more than what side that he is playing on. He's like you mentioned, he played right tackle the year before he made that switch his final year. He's been in the NFL for 2 years and change. He's worked only at right tackle, hasn't taken a snap at any other position since being here because of the presence of Andrew Thomas. I would not do that. I think if the Giants are in a spot where they're putting Evan Neal at left tackle, then they're in a really, really tough spot.
Yeah, I would agree. And Bobby, I believe you played offensive line when you were in school. So just talk to us about how difficult is it, or does it maybe vary according to player to learn new technique, to learn new ways of, positioning your hands. I mean, and I say that because Carmen Brasillo, the offensive line coach, does have a certain way he wants things done, which Evan Neal said are very different than what Bobby Johnson was teaching. So how long can that take, for that muscle memory to build up, do you think, if you had to put a time frame on it?
A time frame, I can't say. Sure, you get comfortable with, like, so I played a certain tackle position in high school, and then my first year in college, I was working as a swing tackle. So I had to practice both, and you never feel fully comfortable, but it just takes repetition of practicing it, right? Like as much as, like, I never felt as comfortable as one side as the other. When you go watch film, it is even if it was just practice film, it's like it's about the fundamentals, right? Some of my best plays were at the position I didn't feel the most comfortable. I actually think it makes the most difference in the run game, because we all have one hand that's stronger than the other, and you want to be able to torque a defender out, right? So you want to be able to torque with that stronger hand. I think that's where it makes the most difference, is actually in the run game. The passing game, I think, is much more about technique, and especially if you're two-hand punching, which Evan Neal has done a lot of, and I think that's something that they're changing from him. That is something that takes some time. Is getting your punches right. I think the footwork and pass protection is it's not very easy, but it's the easiest thing to adjust in.
All right. We're talking with Bobby Skinner of Talking Giants. When we come back, the Eagles are coming to town. Saquon Barkley makes his return. How much do the Giants actually miss Saquon Barkley? We'll discuss that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, for most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on that rare, hard to find card just isn't feasible for many people, no matter how much they enjoy collecting. But thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, it's now possible to score gem mints for a fraction of their retail price. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all possible cards, and clear hit rates for each one. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the repack game with transparency. After your pulls are revealed, they'll immediately be placed in your showroom for safe keeping, selling, trading, or auction. The Arena Club grading process is accurate, fast, and transparent, with a full grade rationale provided and explanation of how your card was scored. Whether you're buying, selling, trading, or displaying, Arena Club is the card collecting platform you have to check out. Right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/lockedonnfl and using the promo code lockedonnfl. That's arenaclub.com/lockedonnfl, code lockedonnfl for 10% off your first purchase. Hey, Giant fans, Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks, and you can get in on all the action during weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday, when Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Prize Picks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Get your payouts within 15 minutes after requesting them. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play just $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus, as it's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, with my special guest, Bobby Skinner of Talking Giants. Joins us on the show. Last week we had Justin Pennick, and we just had to have Bobby on. We can't have one without the other. One of these days we'll get them both on at the same time if we can work it out. But anyway, Bobby, Saquon Barkley is coming back. Obviously, we know how ugly things got there towards the end, but I want to start off by asking you, how much do you think the Giants are missing Saquon Barkley on the field?
I mean, you miss him some. He's a good player, undoubtedly, right? He's an undoubtedly good player. He makes difference for you, right? But The difference is with the running back position, it's just so reliant on offensive line. Like Saquon Barkley's having the best year of his career right now, like yards per game, yards per attempt. Um, he is having the best, the best year of his career. But that doesn't make sense, right? In year 6 of a running back, well, it's because of the offensive line he's playing behind. And behind the offensive line last year, Saquon Barkley was not much of an effective player. He averaged 3.9 yards per carry. The Giants running back Singletary and Tyrone Tracy are averaging more than that. So they certainly miss him, and he was the star player. And so whenever he does well and the Giants do bad, and that could happen this weekend, people will point to that. But I think Giants' issues are much deeper rooted than this letting Saquon Barkley walk.
And I would assume you probably mean in the backfield.
Yeah, well, it's just the Giants. Like, when I look at this past offseason and guys having success elsewhere, I wish Xavier McKinney was here more than Saquon Barkley, right? I think that's somebody who, like, having him next to Tyler Nubin, or maybe they don't even draft Tyler Nubin if they keep Xavier McKinney. So that's actually like the player I miss more so than Saquon Barkley, because I think the Giants can get adequate rushing offenses out of those two guys. And it's not just about this year, right? It's about the long-term financial commitment that the Eagles made to Saquon Barkley, where they had to put 4 years on his contract. They're going to be paying for him, 3-4 years from now. So that's like, I just think the Giants have, they've drafted poorly. The 2022, we just mentioned Evan Neal. He can't name your swing tackle. Kayvon Thibodeau has been an okay player. Now he's injured. Wan'Dale Robinson, a limited player. Josh Azudu and Cordell Flott, you're not getting much out of them, even though Flott's had a good couple of weeks. I think the Giants drafting, lack of drafting is their issue, and not missing Saquon Barkley. So there's never been a moment this year where I'm like, oh man, I wish Saquon Barkley, we would have spent the money to keep Saquon Barkley here. I mean, they're leading the league in sacks, and Brian Burns is a part of that.
So, but also, they took some of that money that would have gone to Saquon to upgrade the offensive line. But the way they built the offensive line, can you make the case and say that line is probably better built for pass blocking than run blocking, just given, the individual components? And in that regard, did they get their value, the true value that, they might have had with Barkley?
Yeah, I think so. The pass protection is king in the NFL, and that allows, guys like Malik Neighbors to lead the league in yards per game and catches, and Wan'Dale Robinson. So I do think they're good. Now, again, I agree. Their run blocking is not so good. Just, specifically on the interior with, John Runyon, JMS, and Greg Van Roten. But I would make that trade trade-off every day of the week. I know Andrew Thomas is out now, so we'll see how the offensive line. But Jermaine Illuminor has been a fantastic signing. Like, it's understated how much he's meant to the offensive line. And when you had him and Thomas, you could trust those guys on the interiors where they sent their help. So I do that trade-off. Like, the Giants have had functioning offensive line play, and you think of last year, you think of the last 10 years, how bad that it's been. This has undoubtedly been their best unit.
We've never had to discuss this because, obviously Giants have always had Saquon Barkley, but now that he is on the other side, what's the best way to defend him?
Well, it's hard to defend the run game for the Philadelphia Eagles because, their rushing unit is so good. I think they're 6th in rushing yards per game. They're 5th in rushing success rate because their offensive line is really good run blocker. So it's really hard to defend them. I think you look to defend the Philadelphia Eagles and not Saquon Barkley. I think the way is you try and create negative runs because you're not going to stack the box, because then you have A.J. Brown one-on-one on the outside, and that's a battle you're going to lose. That's the Eagles' easy button. They're the only team in the NFL where their easy button is throwing the ball deep to a player. So you play from light boxes, which Shane Bowen does, but you blitz, guys like Andrew Phillips, get them more involved in the run. You have Brian Burns and your defensive end slant inside, and you try and create negative runs. You're not going to just, shut down their run game, from start to finish. And I think if there's anything I worry about with this Giants defense after their, last 4 games of playing well, is the fact that they played bad rushing units. Their last 4 games have been teams that are 26 or worse in rushing attempts and yards. So I don't expect them to just stop Saquon Barkley. But if I were the Giants defensive coordinator, I'd be much more worried about stopping A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith.
Speaking of the run game, I mean, for whatever the reason, the Giants' run defense not always sharp. Why do you think that is? And have you seen enough of an improvement, especially, given the injuries they've had? Thibodeau is out. Dexter Lawrence is now banged up. Brian Burns has been playing with, a groin injury now for several weeks. But do you feel a little bit better with the direction that the run defense is headed?
Yes, because of the nickel corner position. The DBs are such an important part of run defense, especially as NFL defenses get lighter and lighter. And with Nick McLeod and Drew Phillips, it makes it like nickel corner is such a huge part of run defense. And both those guys have been really good. When they had Cordell Flott there, you saw some big runs with the Commanders, and the Vikings broke off because of them. So that also, it allows, when you play like that, it forces teams to play a little more inside the tackles, and that allows Dexter Lawrence to make the plays that he does. On the negative side, though, is that the linebackers can't play as free like they did under Wink Martindale. But you haven't seen Bobby Okereke or Mike McFadden make the plays that they did last year. So you're not going to have a 1 yard run, 2 yard run type of defense this way. But what you will have is you'll have some negative 3 yard runs and negative 4 yard runs within the fact that they're going to get 4 or 5 yards a pop on the other runs.
All right, we are talking with Bobby Skinner of Talking Giants. When we come back, we're going to spin ahead and we're going to look at the entirety Giants Eagles this Sunday at MetLife Stadium. Don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the very same page where you place your bets. And right now, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, everybody, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and my guest today is Bobby Skinner of Talking Giants. And Bobby, the Eagles come to town on Sunday, as we all know, a team that, for the most part, has had the Giants' number, although the Giants didn't beat them in the regular season finale. I think it was last year. But still, you look at this Eagles team, and they're not the powerhouse that they were maybe a few years ago. Jalen Hurts has been a turnover machine. What do you see just overall when you look at this Eagles team? Where are they most vulnerable?
This week specifically, their left tackle position. Jordan Mailata is not going to play, and then they're going to have to play a guy named Fred Johnson, who has filled in for Lane Johnson earlier in the year. He has the worst pass blocking production in the NFL. He is a liability that they have out there. I think that is where you go against them offensively. The rest of the offense is very strong. Jalen Hurts has created turnovers, but they've also created big plays. Their run game has been successful. But the way that, to beat Jalen Hurts is to pressure him and force him into mistakes. The Giants, they need to put Brian Burns on the Eagles left tackle, Fred Johnson, and go after it all game. Where the real matchup is, though, is the Giants offense versus the Eagles defense. Their defense is not very good. They are basically below average in every category except for red zone defense, which has been, a Giants struggle on offense. But the way they plays in the Daniel Jones strength. They give up the quick game. They're not very good against the run. And the difference between this week and last week, because Lou Anarumo played that same way with the Bengals, but they adjusted, right? They got, stack box. They played more aggressive. Well, now the Giants have Malik Neighbors back, and I trust Malik Neighbors against any of their corners, whether it's the rookie Kenyon Mitchell, who played well, Darius Slay, Avonte Maddox. That's the Giants' weapon on offense is Malik Neighbors. That despite the fact that no matter how bad you feel about Daniel Jones, he can deliver the ball to Malik Neighbors on, all the routes except for the deep ones, so far this year. So I actually think the Giants, I like this matchup for the Giants. They got to protect their, Josh Suzuki, but depending on how they play, the Giants can take the quick game. If they get a little more aggressive, you throw the ball to Malik Neighbors. But I do like this matchup for the Giants offense.
Well, you mentioned the red zone, which has been a dead zone for the Giants offense. Why do you think it is? Has that been execution, play calling, a combination? What do you see as maybe being a common thread with the red zone struggles?
It's tough to pin it on one thing. I feel like there's been times where Dable goes for the kill shot and the Giants haven't been able to deliver. You think of that, that interception last week against the Bengals where that's basically, it's not a trick play because it doesn't have a, reverse or anything, but it's you're trying to trick the defense. Their run game, they haven't been able to like pound it in, at the goal line, and that led to, a 14-point swing essentially against the Seattle Seahawks with a fumble. And I think their lack of tight end production has led to an issue too. But I think it's Daniel Jones, and I think that's where Brian Dable's been his weakest. Go back to the Cowboys game. It's 3rd and goal at the 7-yard line. We throw a ball 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage to Wan'Dale Robinson. So now he has to get 11 yards jack. He doesn't, and then you have to kick a field goal. So it's been an array of issues, but it stands on Daniel Jones, but the Giants just haven't done a good job of being efficient there, where it feels like they're trying to go for the kill shot or throw the ball behind the line of scrimmage down there.
Do you feel that the offense is limited with Daniel Jones at quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, we know he hasn't been aggressive as a thrower since his rookie year, and we can't keep recalling his rookie year of getting that back. He's actually thrown the ball deeper more so this year than he has every year besides his rookie year. But he's just been flat out inaccurate. Completion percentage wise, the only quarterback that's been lower is Tyler Huntley for the Dolphins, who's been 0 for 7 on those deep throws. I don't know if it's the injuries that are doing it, because he's never been inaccurate on these deep passes before. He's been awfully inaccurate, and the Giants haven't been able to take advantage of that. And until they do, teams will start to play them in a more aggressive way. When that does work, when they do hit it, it's awesome. The Seahawks game without Malik Neighbors, they were able to hit some of those deep shots. I do think they are limited because teams are just trying to take away the first read. They'll show you like, oh, the first read's there, and then drive on it. So yeah, I do think they are limited.
I was just going to ask you, there was a stat posted from Pro Football Focus. Daniel Jones leads quarterbacks who throw on their first read the most, with an 88.8 percentage, followed by Trevor Lawrence, Andy Dalton, Will Levis, and then Jaden Daniels is fifth with 77.2%. But Jaden Daniels has had success, whereas maybe Daniel Jones hasn't. Again, does it come down to the execution, the play call, or just, what do you think's been the difference? Because Jaden Daniels is playing really well considering he's a rookie.
When you have Malik Neighbors there, you can afford to throw to your first read a little more. The issue is that Wan'Dale Robinson has been the first read on a lot of stuff, and he's another limited player. And they've targeted him behind the sticks on 3rd down way too often, just way too often. You shouldn't be averaging 7 yards per catch as a wide receiver, and I think Wan'Dale Robinson's right around that number. So that's what they've done, because they want him to play that Cole Beasley role, which is nice on 3rd and 4. On 3rd and 7, it's not as much. But I think Brian Dable is calling the offense around Daniel Jones' limitations, and that sounds good. But teams eventually pick up on it, and it's up to the quarterback to adjust. Against the Bengals, he did not.
Do you see them sticking with Daniel Jones if the losses continue to pile up, knowing that injury guarantee is staring them in the face?
Yes. And again, unless it gets towards, we talk about the very, end of the season type of stuff. But it seems like they have no fear. Daniel Jones is running just as much as he ever has in his NFL career. And it's not because of scrambles. Like, they're running him between the tackles. I don't think he's ever he is not just not avoiding contact. It feels like he's seeking out contact, where he's trying to run through guys' chests. So there has been, I don't think he slid one time this year. Even last week, it was a 3rd and 15. He scrambles. It's a 7 to 8 yard scramble. Nobody open. He's at the sideline. Instead of going out at the sideline and not taking a hit, he tries to run through a guy's chest, and it's 4th and 7, and they punt the ball. So the Giants seem to not have any fear. And I also, like, these guys are coaching for their jobs. They're GMing for their jobs. I don't see them making that change until the season is essentially over.
Yeah, I agree. Just getting back to the Giant Eagle game, though, we talked about, the matchups here. Where are the Eagles on defense most vulnerable for the Giants to attack?
Their secondary is just not very good. They make mental mistakes. They don't really hang. Darius Slay hasn't been very good. Chauncey Gardner has, been pretty awful. It's their secondary and their linebackers. Like I just think they play off coverage and they keep everything underneath you. And when they don't, you have guys that can just go out there and win. I think that secondary is very, very weak.
And hence the return of Malik Neighbors would probably help tremendously.
Yeah, I mean, and you basically like every matchup that you have, unless it's Darius Slayton versus Kenyon Mitchell, the rookie first-round pick out of Toledo. Like if Malik Neighbors is going against any of their DBs, I like it. I like the Wan'Dale Robinson versus Avonte Maddox matchup in the slot. And if it's Darius Slayton versus Darius Slay, I'm picking Slayton in that matchup. So I think that's where the Giants can have an advantage this week.
All right, a couple more for you, Bobby. With Saquon coming back, a lot of people are expecting the crowd to be hostile. Do you think it's just time to move on from that and, just look ahead as opposed to just harbor ill feelings towards the guy?
No, I think the Giants should take advantage of every advantage they can get. We know that Saquon Barkley, Patty, you work in the media. He is very conscious of what people are saying about him, thinking about him. Get in Saquon Barkley's head. We know Saquon Barkley's dropped some passes. We've seen him drop passes that have led to interceptions. The Giants should boo him every single chance that they get. And I understand the business of it, right? The Giants weren't going to make an offer that the Philadelphia Eagles made. At the end of the day, this is a business. Saquon Barkley would be silly to pass up an extra $3 million per year to stay with the Giants or go to the Chicago Bears or whoever. But at the end of the day, this is still a sport. It's still a game and still a game with fans. And if you leave from the New York Giants to the Philadelphia Eagles, you're not going to be beloved by this fan base. So I do think the Giants should boo. Like have a home field advantage, which the Giants have not had this year.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of which, why do you think it's been so hard for the Giants to win at home? Because of, because the crowd hasn't been in. I mean, I don't want to blame the crowd because obviously they can react however they want, but it just seems like the Giants are a different team and a better team on the road. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts as to why the Giants have been so stagnant at home.
I think it's random. The Vikings are an undefeated team that they lost to at home. The Cowboys game, they couldn't finish in the red zone. The Cowboys didn't, play particularly well in that game. And then the Bengals, I don't think it has much to do with the crowd. Now, you could argue that the Giants' home crowd doesn't give them the advantage that some other teams have, but I think the home road splits are random.
Okay. And then Bobby, just real quick, what's your feeling about Sunday's game?
The Eagles should be favored in this game. They have the playmakers on the offense. This is not a bad matchup for the New York Giants. Like this really isn't. This isn't the Philadelphia Eagles of the past couple of years. They are a very vulnerable team. We saw the Giants beat them in that regular season finale last week. So my unbiased mind says that the Eagles will win, but I think the Giants are going to give them issues. I think the Giants pass rush is going to give them some issues. For the Giants, it's about not letting A.J. Brown beat you individually, not letting their run game beat you individually. And then Daniel Jones just playing the best version of himself, which isn't an MVP quarterback, but it's, what we saw in Seattle. It's, what we saw in Cleveland outside of a handful of throws. And then Malik Neighbors, just being the star that he is. So I think the Giants definitely should not be heavy underdogs in this game. They should be the underdogs, but they in no means should be heavy underdogs.
Well, here's hoping that the Giants pull out a win because I know that will pick up a lot of people's spirits if they can beat the Eagles, a team that has had their number for the better part of the last decade plus or so. Bobby, listen, I want to thank you for coming on. It's always great to have you on. You're always so well prepared. You and Justin do a great job. He's Bobby Skinner of Talking Giants. Check out their pod. Giant fans, thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on Locked On Giants. Be sure to tune in next week. I'll have takeaways from the Giants-Eagles game. Hopefully it'll be a winning game, and we'll have a Victory Monday to talk about. And then, of course, I'm also working on some more guests for you next week here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Have a great weekend, everybody.